On this episode of Something to Talk About, Superior Court Judge Maria Senzon and Josh Tenorio, the court's administrator. We're going to talk about the Veterans Treatment Court, a concept that allows troubled vets to straighten out their lives through a system of care that'll keep them out of jail. That's ahead on Something to Talk About. Welcome to Something to Talk About. As I said, Superior Court Judge Maria Senzon, Court's Administrator Josh Tenorio, here to talk about the Veterans Treatment Court, which is how new is the court when you compare it to the other courts that are under your...
Well, we're relatively new. We just launched on September 10th of last year, so we're just a few months into the program, and we've already gotten, I think we've populated our court with about... Actually, I want to say 20 folks now, which is actually higher than most jurisdictions have at this point for their own veterans treatment courts. And so we have a few others who are still waiting to get into the veterans treatment court at this point.
How are the courts examining the need for this specific care for this specific group? What was the process?
Well, I have to say that I think the original idea came, or the person that brought it to our attention was retired General Benny Paulino, and I think he told me the other day that all the adjutant generals in the country were assembled, and there was a presentation from the Justice Department and from a judge, in particular the judge from Buffalo that started the court, talking about the program. So it's become a very a favorite funding program. The Congress has prioritized funding for this. The Justice Department has been pushing programs, and I think it's reaction to the fact that quite a large number of people have been deployed in this 15-year war on terror. And so just based on that, recognizing that some of these veterans that may have some issues that are maybe not treated yet or unknown, and some of those issues may be the underlying cause of some of the criminal behavior that has resulted.
Yeah, they're coming back. They're coming back and discovering that there are other issues. I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, it's been 15 years, but it's been a long time since we've had a set of veterans that have returned from war or returned from some kind of action someplace. So tell me about the specific needs that veterans have in the area of...
Right, and as you mentioned, I mean, you say 15 years, but really it goes far beyond that time frame. We're talking about World War II veterans, Korean War veterans, or Vietnam War veterans, and I think the establishment of the very first Veterans Treatment Court in 2008 in Buffalo was a recognition of how poorly the country treated those who were returning after the Vietnam War. And then recognizing as well that we were seeing many justice-involved veterans who are coming in on drug charges or other charges that were a manifestation of their effects of being a soldier in a war, and sleeping with your sidearm and showering with your sidearm. And so I think that really currently there are about 11,000 throughout the nation who are veterans who are involved in and participating in veterans treatment courts. And so really it's a recognition of all these factors that were as a result of their service to the country that we really needed to provide them with a specific court to recognize both their contributions and then to provide them with that specialized care that would be available to them through, the Veterans Administration and Veterans Benefits.
Yeah, so I thought it was interesting, Josh, that you were saying that you're pairing veterans with counterparts that have gone through a specific branch of service. That makes a big difference in the communication, doesn't it?
I think there's so many differences between the branches of service. Even understanding those is a challenge.
Sure. It's a culture.
Absolutely.
And a language, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of competition between the branches, too.
Yeah, this is true.
A friendly competition. But I think, trying to match people that have as many similar experiences as possible, it creates an environment of trust. And it's also gives the court an opportunity to be better informed about what's happening with these justice-involved veterans that are coming before it.
Yeah. So we've established the court. It's been established since last year. But what about the people, the veterans? Do you have people responding to be? Do you call them counterparts? Or, yeah, mentors. Okay.
Yeah. We actually do have quite a long.
Well, actually resulting from that conversation that we had, and some of the other media reports, we just scratched the surface. I've spoken to 10 different people already that volunteered, and really, if we're the ideal is to have as many mentors as possible, so that we don't burn them out. You're going to be, and I think maybe the judge has an observation also. She's been trained on what the mentors do, but we had an opportunity to observe it in action in Hawaii a couple weeks ago, and
I want to hear about that, because you actually was it the first time that you got to see how it works?
Yes, and in fact, it was great to see how we're not far off the mark if we're not even are very distant from it. It's, seeing the only component that we have not yet implemented is our mentor program. But that is one of the most significant and integral parts of the Veterans Treatment Court. What we saw in Hawaii was that they're not just the support, but they provide the not just the support outside of court, but also in court. What we did witness was, the judge, how it normally works is there's staffing with the treatment providers, the VA justice-involved veterans. I think it's the person, the officer who's in charge of that, as well as the coordinator. And they were talking about a particular defendant and how the judge was going to, send him to what's called a clean and sober house because he had certain violations. Once it got to hearing, the judge actually had a reconsideration of that opinion because of the mentor standing up for that defendant at the hearing. So he said, Your Honor, I know where you're going with this clean and sober house, but, really I have to support my guy here because I've seen the changes that he's made since the beginning of his first appearance in front of you up to now, and I think that would be a regression for him. So we want to encourage him. So the judge actually took it under consideration, and he's going to rule the following week, which, I don't know what the final outcome is, but at least, that mentor is there not just as a support in the event that defendant is unable to comply with or is struggling with a condition of his pre-trial release or his probation, but then once they're in court, they also are there to
they can help guide the decision.
Like, hey, I really support him.
No. I mean, I think
different.
They have speaking roles.
Yeah.
So the judge, I think, is going to be able to rely on mentors to give them additional information they might not be seeing, or maybe something that the veteran who's involved in the system is not able to articulate for himself.
So how much of a relationship does the vet court have with the actual mentor? I mean, does it come through the Veterans Affairs office here, or are they involved in that at all? Or
purely voluntary.
Okay.
They just come in and they say, I'm interested to serve as a mentor in your program, and they speak with, right now it's Joshua, but we have our own Veterans Treatment Court coordinator, and that's Jay Perez.
Yeah.
And a community supervisor, Christine Tamanglo.
That she just got married.
Invention.
Okay.
Invention.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
but
they're different. They
Yeah.
have different roles, because the community supervisor, as an employee of the court, is the one that's going to be there and say, hey, you violated this. I need to tell the court that there's been a violation. Whereas the mentor doesn't have that role. That his or her role for that veteran is purely support. And so,
But the judge, in your case, you have to establish there's some credibility with this mentor, right?
Yes.
No, sure. There's a vetting process, and there's going to be some briefings and training. There's some structured training information. But the unique thing about veterans treatment courts are popping up so fast, and one of the things that the Justice Department is doing, and the National Center for State Courts is doing, is trying to really take a look and find out what are the most effective practices, because how it's unlike the network of drug court programs in the country, which is a very, very defined, regimented, structured program. These veterans programs have been not uniform. And so some states and some jurisdictions are performing better than others, and the challenge for us is making sure that we establish a good sustainable program that works for us in Guam. Of course, looking to Hawaii and places that have a similar demographic mix is important for us. But I tell you that I was personally inspired by what I saw. I didn't go to any training. Really, my job is to try and provide the judge and her team as much support as I can. But having seen it and understanding what the challenges were in trying to identify mentors, I decided to apply my skill set and do some outreach with the judge to try and get that pool of candidates to go forward and get this moving, I think.
And I want to take a break here, but I do want to ask how difficult it has been, or if there has been difficult to get volunteers to do this, and then what kind of resources are available after you have rendered a decision. What is the next step for these veterans? That what you're trying to do is avoid them going to jail if it's not necessary for that to happen. We are talking about the Veterans Treatment Court. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm here with Judge Maria Senzon, Courts Administrator Josh Tenorio, and we're talking about Veterans Treatment Court, which is a newly established, is it the most newly established court under the Superior Court? I have to ask you, once you have rendered a decision, once you have the case has gone through the court system, what is on the other side of that?
And that's a really good question, and the goal of the Veteran Treatment Court is not just to connect the veteran to the services that they are entitled to, but that they would not necessarily know exist for them. So at the other end of the, post-adjudication phase of the treatment court is they're provided with information and services for CBOC, which is the community-based outreach clinic up at the Veterans Hospital, right, or the Naval Hospital, as well as with housing, any other benefits that they may be entitled to that they are not aware that they might need, and other, really the services that are important for them, because this is a treatment court, are the counseling and the drug and alcohol treatment. And then if they have been diagnosed, for example, with a post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis or a TBI.
Traumatic brain injury, it's a big thing,
that's to make sure that they also get those services. Unfortunately, not a lot of those services are available for them on island.
Yeah.
So really it's a habilitation, and what we were trained on is it's not a rehabilitation, because there's nothing to rehabilitate. It's like a building up of the individual after they've come out of the service. And so there are a lot of benefits and services available to these individuals that they may not.
Well, like post-adjudication, and you find out that somebody has to leave the island and seek services elsewhere, then who pays for that? Is it the families that have to pay for that?
Or? It's actually, if they've already turned in their DD-214 and we've already established that they are entitled to these benefits, then it's covered by the benefits that they're entitled to as a service member. And so that's one of the differences between, for example, our mental health court and our veteran treatment court is that there's services that are available through
their own through their own benefits,
as opposed to the Guam Behavioral Health.
What kind of crimes are we talking about? I know we had a conversation about the severity of a crime. What are the offenses that could let you go through a veterans treatment court as opposed to?
Sure, we have two tracks. The first track is our the drug-related offenses, the drug and alcohol-related offenses, the possessions, the use, and then our track 2, which is our I call them the violent offenses, but really it's everything other than just the non-violent offenses or the drug and alcohol. But there also has to be a diagnosis of either drug and alcohol abuse or a mental health diagnosis. So that's the first step is determining whether or not they're legally eligible to participate in the program. And then the second step is to determine whether or not they're clinically eligible. So you have to satisfy those two prongs before you're admitted into it.
And that also includes in the event that there is family violence or domestic, that sort of thing?
I think it has to, if if anybody's looking at this issue, especially PTSD issues or substance abuse issue, really results in major pressures inside that home. So it would be, you would expect that family violence is an issue. Now we have an excellent family violence court that Judge Barcinas is currently presiding over, with lots of therapeutic programs. What I think we'll probably design as part of this is, you know, trying to do hybrid things within the Veterans Treatment Court, of making sure that the men's group, for example, that you would have to go would be a men's group of veterans, you know, and trying to address it those ways. And I wanted to add that the folks that are not going to be eligible for the Veterans Court that Judge Senzan is presiding over, there will be other veterans that will be falling into any of the other 6 trial courts. It could be based on the severity of the crime or unwillingness to participate. What we're doing with the probation office and our client services and family counseling division is trying to establish some gates, I guess, or catch-alls, so that we'll be able to, at least if they're not in VTC, we can still try and inform them or help them try and get some benefits. As long as they're not incarcerated, they'll be eligible for them, and try and get them maybe to get through the pipeline that we hope to maintain with service providers.
Well, who starts it off? I mean, how do you determine who goes into what track, and who is it? Is it an attorney, their
Well,
legal
it can
counsel?
be, or the judge, or probation. So, for example, if you take an offense where there's a DUI, let's say, and the pre-trial screening or the first appearance screening will indicate whether or not, if they can catch them there, whether or not they have prior military service, and so it will be indicated, you know, veteran, possible for treatment, the treatment court. If it's not captured at that stage, then the attorney can ask the court, if it's the DWI court or the adult drug court or the general jurisdiction court, for consideration to the veteran treatment court. At that stage, it's not yet transferred to the veteran treatment court, but they do those legal and the clinical evaluations. So all of those have to occur. And then the individual has to agree to participate. So that means executing a handbook that says, I agree to be held to, you know, the treatment plan.
Which they want to do. Which, I mean, the idea is to keep them out of.
Yes, to keep them out of that the criminality. And to focus on the treatment if that's what's warranted.
And it requires more intensive supervision.
Right.
So part of the program is you're agreeing to undergo more structured process. You're going to be able, you agree to get screened, or once you're screened, you agree that you're going to participate in your treatment programs. But also, you know, the interaction with the court is greater for people coming in.
Oh, it's much
So, you know, it's a big commitment that needs to be made, but it's also a way of trying to vet and see how we can identify resources and place them to, you know, to have the success rate increase over time.
Well, you know, there's always been a problem. I mean, we lack in the services toward vets anyway. The CBOC is, you know, is certainly the topic of a lot of controversy now. So I'm wondering, you know, in your capacity, and you're sending them on, you know, to one of these services, do you find there's a little bit of frustration that some of these services are not necessarily available promptly?
Right. Well, I have to say, actually, we've been very fortunate in that before we even launched the court, that we did have the intense involvement by Dr. Gill and other treatment providers up at CBOC, as well as Dr. Santos at the Veterans Clinic, and then we even have our own on-island, so, you know, our Guam Behavioral Health representatives who are also involved. So there's those 3 different lines of services available to the individual. So if CBOC has to wait, you know, a couple of weeks or whatever it is for the evaluation to be performed, the alternative is Dr. Santos. We can't get to him for another 2 months. The alternative then is Guam Behavioral. Or
so you've developed a lot of safety nets.
Yeah, no,
because that would be the thing that would.
Several plans.
Yeah.
Sure, no. In fact, as a result of our meetings in Hawaii, I decided to identify we have a team of clinicians that are mostly focused on juvenile clients, victims, and family violence folks, family violence defendants. And so there's one of them in particular, a senior one that is a veteran herself, that I'm making plans to make available and to pick up some of this work to have additional ways of catching these.
Yeah.
There are always, I think as we found out, there are people that are going to slip through the cracks, or because they weren't eligible for certain benefits, are not going
But
to.
that you might not have known about
Sure.
until it was too late.
So I think it's important
see, that's
to
the-
have those, to catch those.
Yeah. Several
And
layers
so
of-
we could, which is my job, to
Yeah.
support so that she can get the focus on the program outcomes and get the services that they need or we need to provide.
Right. So the idea here is looking for mentors who can partner up. How do they go about, signing up, and what is the evaluation process, or what is the processing like? Do you have to do an evaluation on
Yes,
the
we do.
mentors,
There is
potential mentors?
As we mentioned, a vetting process. So
Yeah.
They have to just come down to meet with our community supervisor or our coordinators, Jay Perez or Christine, and to fill out an application form. It asks a variety of different questions. What is their expertise? What is their, what branch are they on?
Right.
And so
They can't have a criminal record, clearly.
Well, the
We're looking
the
at
issue-
that.
yeah,
Really?
Because and the reason why we are doing that is, like, for example, in the Honolulu Veteran Treatment Court, there's a couple of graduates who want to serve as mentors to show that, hey, I can do it, you can do it too.
I see.
But there has to be that period of time between the end of their probationary or parole period and the time that
The
they
start
serve.
that they want to
Sure.
mentor, yeah.
A minimum of a year, just to make sure that there's no further issues with regard to that.
I think they'll take a look at what the crime was. But yesterday I spoke to a veteran that was very thankful we're doing this, but had been involved. Had a family violence case, and he had a PTSD diagnosis, but went through counseling. In fact, he said, it was such a win for him, but
Yeah.
it took such a long time, and he's hoping to provide that kind of mentorship and support and point to himself as a success story. Getting a job. I want to say before we run too much out of time, I think, number one, for those that are disabled that are maybe not employable, trying to make sure they get all of the benefits they need to sustain themselves. And even if they're disabled, there may be some things they can do to tap on their talents to try and maybe get additional income. But there are many that are unemployed. And I think one of the big things that the science of criminology tells us is somebody has a job, the likelihood of them returning is going to just reduce so much. And
sure.
that's part of a general movement we're having at our probation office, but in particular geared towards the veteran. That's something I think that we'll be identifying resources to support.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, I'm really impressed that you're even here, because I know that you are a very, very busy judge. So I appreciate you taking the
Thank
time
you.
out to help
Thank
us
you
out.
for
And you
letting us
two,
get the word out.
you guys are so busy over there. The fact that you even answer the phone sometimes
No,
is
but this is
amazing.
such an important.
Yeah.
We want to see a win, and I think the number of people that are involved is high. I think it compels us to do something.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.
Okay,
And
thank
that'll
you.
do it for us here on Something to Talk About. We'll see you on the radio. Thanks for joining us.